Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is part two, number two of Lilith's Cave, a book exploration of Jewish folklore.
Welcome to Jevim's research channel. Be advised that this channel is not for anyone under the age of 18. Also, the research and discoveries of this channel should not ever reflect the personal opinion or views of Jevim or her team unless publicly stated. Please understand that the opinions of the audience is also not a reflection of what or how Jevim feels. Let's bring a curious mind and open heart to these spaces for educational purposes only.
Hi, everyone. Hi. I have taken to liking to hold the mic. Gives me something to do with my hands. Hey, Mugs. Good to see ya. We're learning about some Jewish folklore, but we're gonna do a sortes first. Hey, look at you dropping links on both of those streams. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry I didn't stick around last night. It was a long day. I was really tired. Whew, was I tired? Okay, so our sortes is gonna be from John Milton's Paradise Lost, of course. Love doing sortes out of this one. It's really awesome. And then we're gonna be doing we're gonna look at one of those Lilith spells, the incantation protection charms that we read about. And we're definitely gonna get back into the intro of this book, Lilith's Cave, because it's very telling, right? Okay, so sortes. Where are we? In Paradise Lost. Bent their aspect, and whom they wished beheld, their mighty chief returned. Loud was the acclaim. Forth rushed in haste the great counseling peers, raised from their dark divine, and with like joy congruent approached him, who with hand silence and with these words attention won. Thrones, dominations, princedoms, virtues, powers. For in possession such, not only of right, I call ye and declare ye now returned. Very interesting, right? So that was John Milton's Paradise Lost. And let's see, let me get up here. All right. So this one I found on Facebook. I'm using two different. What we're reading? We are reading Lilith's Cave, a book exploration. It's Jewish folklore that was recommended by someone who had been as aid. So that's why we dive into that. Hello, Angel darling. How you doing? How you doing? Okay, so right here, if you see it, maybe I can make it bigger for us. There we go. You still hear me? I hope you can. Okay. So this is a reproduction here is a medieval amulet written or printed on parchment to protect mother and child from Lilith during and after pregnancy. So it Lilith has been used for a long time as a demoness uh, that was meant to harm babies. The amulet parchment features drawings of three bird-like angels, namely Sinoi, Sansinoi, and Samangalof, coopted to Christian lore as the saints Sisinios, I'm butchering those, I'm sorry, and Sidendrois, whose sole purpose was to restrain Lilith. So three saints to restrain her. They are evidently male angels, but the bird like nature is not elsewhere on an angelic trait. It is a trait of sirens and bird goddesses, such as the Sumerio-Akkadian Kalili, famed for the Burney relief with wings and eagle talons, who served as captain of Ishtar and known as 18 messenger goddesses. The three angels against Lilith likely originated as themselves three Lolith engaged in restraining their own mother. Very interesting, y'all. They are by far the most common angels on protective amulets, as the most often sought amulets were to protect pending births. Paper amulets would be pasted to walls, doors, and bed frames. Isn't that interesting? I think that's very interesting that we're using the sons that would save them. Oh, okay, it's in the Zephyr Raziel from Amsterdam, 1701. That's what we're looking at here. Protection amulet. You know what that reminds me of a little bit, and I know this could be far fetched, but that kind of reminds me of the Ark of the Covenant a little bit. Yep. Okay, these angels, even by combining their strength, never could harm Lilith. Their first attempt was when she willfully divorced Adam, having been his first wife, and three angels were sent to retrieve her. Doesn't it make sense that you have to send flying monkeys to retreat? Yeah. What do we got going on in China? In China, China is paying women to stay married. Did y'all know that? Okay. All right. So this I found on Facebook. It is let's see. It is on the page The Divine Shekinah, which I follow, but it's interesting that we're going to see about the Divine Shekinah. Okay, so share this one instead. I got to reborrow it, guys. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay. I could be in the middle, but you can't really see me because I'm like way over here. I have to look in this other computer. I could bring it down here. Just have to look down at it for you all. Okay. I like it like that. No, I don't. Where are we going? How about right here? And I could take this for entertainment. I could take my banner off. I think I will do that. Where is it at? I don't even, there's the banner. There is so much to go stream with now. It's confusing. Okay, let me make this bigger. I want to go back to the introduction where we left off. It's a long introduction. And then there's cliff notes to the introduction, which I thought was just crazy. Okay, let's see. I'm going to start right here because I don't remember the page. Please forgive me, y'all. Okay, still another variant of this motif is found in the famous 18th century ethical text Kav Hayashar, the Seller. Here, a man's life is threatened by a demon, and he is spared only as when he agrees to marry the demon's daughter. He does, and they produce demon offspring. Before his death, the man bestows on the demons the right to live in his cellar. We got children under the stairs, y'all. People under the stairs. That's what that reminds me of. When the house is sold to another family, they unlock the cellar, and the demons fight them tooth and nail, tormenting them in many ways. Yeah, okay, because this is coming back to me. We were reading about a haunted house where demons were born. At last, the matter is brought to a rabbinic court for settlement, and the demons are expelled. One of the latest versions of this tale, The Other Side, dates from 19th century Eastern Europe. Here, an unsuspecting man is lured to the kingdom of the demons, not far from his own city, and step by step falls under the power of the demons, who finally wed him to one of their own, then dissolve the illusion, leaving him broken and mute. And it is only after the rabbinic court commands the demons to appear and rules against them that the man is freed from their curse. This is so crazy. This is so crazy. Who is in here? Hello? See? I don't see, I don't know why this is not popping up. Chuny, is it Chuny? Yeah, we have people in the long form version of the stream that I can't see. It's really weird. I don't know what's going on. But if you don't get a shout out, I promise it's because I can't see you. It's not because you're being ignored. I'm having some tea. Okay. Perhaps the most interesting of the variants is one of 19th century Prague, in which a young woman, Hamina, follows her lover into the sea, prepared to end her life, only to discover that he is a demon ruler of the river, who makes her his bride in the underwater palace. This tale combines two basic tale types into one. One of these is that of marriage with demons, and the other concerning a midwife who is brought to the kingdom of the demons. That's interesting. That's interesting because a lot of these tales, a lot of these shamanic stories go straight back to the midwives. Exactly. Here, the midwife motif is found in the subplot about the aunt of the girl whose name is Shifra. Shifra, yeah. And who, as a midwife, is brought to the underwater palace to deliver the child of the girl and her demon husband. Note that the aunt's name is the same as that of the midwife in Exodus 1:15. Very interesting because I don't know if you all have heard of the Red Tent or watched the Red Tent, listen to the Red Tent, but the Red Tent is a fictional story based off of Dinah in Genesis, who is Jacob's only daughter. Jacob's only daughter was from a long line of midwife women who worship the goddess Inanna. That's how it was written by the Jewish lady who was pulling from the Midrash, which is an allegorical, whimsical way of spinning uh, biblical tales in ways for people to kind of understand and integrate them, if that makes sense. Most of these things go straight back to midwives. It's very interesting to me. So I don't know the midwife in Exodus 1:15, but I do want to look it up. Exodus 1:15 marks the beginning of Pharaoh's direct order to the Hebrew midwives Shiphrah and Puah to kill newborn Hebrew boys. Okay, this is what me and Stone Bible were talking about the other day in the Discord group. Mhm. to kill the firstborn sons, that would be a form of culling. The midwife controlled these things, right? Yeah. Very, very powerful. Very, very powerful position in society. Such tales involving a midwife needed to deliver a child or a mujer required to perform the circumcision are found in both European and Middle Eastern sources. Okay, so cutting of the skin, cutting of the flesh, this goes back. These stories emphasize the parallels between the lives of humans and those of demons. For the Yene Welt is a distorted mirror image of this world. Very interesting. What is that? Yene Welt. Let's look that up. Oh, the great works of Jewish fantasy and occult. Very interesting. Mm. Oh, shit. It's on archive too, y'all. It's on archive, y'all. And look at this. I'm going to share it with you. Look here. Does that not look awesome? I hope you can see it. You have to borrow it. I'm going to favor it. It was published in 1978. It's Yiddish. Very interesting. Yeah. Yakum Nagashel. Nu Nugorshel. It's very interesting. Okay. All right. So there it is. You can find that also on archive.org. It's super cool. I've got so many tabs with archive open. Okay. All right. These stories emphasize the parallels between the lives of humans and demons. For the Welt is a distorted mirror image of this world. Okay. So what he's saying is the book I just showed you is actually a distorted image of it's like a peek into more occult knowledge. And this is what you have to do is you have to connect the dots and you have to go like this treasure hunt to kind of trace back the truth of our history. The older written versions of this tale almost all certain mujer who is led to Gehenna, and the more recent oral versions are almost all about a midwife who is taken to the land of the demons. The fact that two such separate tale types have been combined here demonstrates how the folk process constantly remakes old themes in new ways and thus keeps the tale alive in the retelling. Wash, rinse, rename, repeat, right? And it is the oral tradition for the most part. In one tale of considerable importance in which this theme of marriage with demons is found, it is possible to glimpse the historical kernel underlying it. In this tale, the demon of the waters collected in the 1930s from the Ukrainian immigrant in Israel. The stairway to the mikvah, a ritual bath, collapses, throwing a woman into the river where she is carried away while her demonic double emerges from the waters, takes her place, and proceeds to behave in a violent and abusive manner. Wow, that sounds like a traumatic event to rid you of, I don't know, your humanity, your mortal coil. Who knows? This seems very traumatic. Throwing women in water has damaged me ever since I read the what is it, the Witch's Hammer? Yeah, the Malefius Maleficorum. The Malefius Maleficorum is horrific. I've burned that book. I have set it aflame. It is not difficult to read between the lines of this tale to discern the human tragedy of madness and the specific naming of the characters, the place, and the customs make it clear that an actual incident lies behind it, not merely a fantasy. So that right there is we're telling you in the introduction about these that the truth is somewhere in all this fantasy, um, Disney like qualities. And we know that this is how it works in the occult. They're going to tell us without telling us because they need to tell us. That has absolved them. Demons are not the only supernatural beings found in Jewish lore. There are angels, spirits, and other kinds of imaginary creatures such as vampires, werewolves, goblins, and ghosts. Sometimes the spirit of one who is dead takes possession of the living being. This spirit is called the dybbuk, and from the 16th century on, accounts of possession by dybbuks multiplied with alarming frequency. These are not folk tales in the usual sense, sorry, because almost all of the literary hundreds of accounts of such possessions insist that the event actually occurred and give all kinds of specific details about those involved. The pattern in these tales is almost always the same. The debuk, the spirit of the dead, takes possession of the victim. Eventually, the matter is brought to the attention of the rabbi, who interrogates the debuk and eventually casts it out, usually through the little finger or toe of the victim. This is just wild to me. This is just wild. This is what is the root of all these possessions? It's crazy. The pattern is found in the Debuk, a tale about how a widow of Safed was possessed and how Rabbi Hayim Vittel, disciple of Rabbi Isaac, sorry, Luria, I knew he was going to say Luria, succeeded in exorcising the Debuk. This tale emerged in the 16th century at around the same time as the major compendium of Yiddish folk tales. The Messiah book appeared in Eastern Europe, in which one of the earliest debut tales can be found. It is these tales in Sheveh Ha-Ari and the Messiah book that set the pattern for virtually all subsequent debut tales. Sometimes the debut finds a superstitious way of entering a person, such as in the tale of Shiriri Ha-Ari about the dabuk who enters a fish, and then this fish is caught and eaten. The dabuk is able to enter the body of the woman who eats it. That sounds like a parasite, y'all. I'm pretty sure that's, yeah, sounds like a parasite. In other cases, the demon is able to approach a person because he or she said, "Go to the devil," as in the Bride of Demons, the first tale told by Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, the great Hasidic storyteller. The Lost Princess begins with just such a curse, causing the princess to be taken over into the realms of evil, requiring an epic quest in order to set her free. Oh my gosh. Yep. An evil curse causing the princess to be taken over into the realms of evil. That sounds like a major traumatic experience in order to set her free. Wow. Okay. I want to get to some stories. Which one? I'm telling you, the Cliff Notes is where most of the. Yeah. where most of the tales are. All right, Bride of Demons. Let's get into this one. Definitely. Oops. Bride of Demons. In the city of Frankfurt, a girl was about to be married, and on the eve of the Sabbath before the marriage, she and her mother had a dispute over what she was going to wear. The girl refused to wear the wedding dress of her mother. She wanted one of her own. In particular, there was a dress she had seen in the market that she could not get out of her mind. She wanted to buy it, even though it would take all of her savings, but her mother wanted her to save the money. At least her mother became so angry. At last, sorry, her mother became so angry with her, and she said, "Go to the devil." And she walked out of the girl's room and slammed the door. Shortly after that, the girl left the house. She walked into that town and went directly to the merchant who had the wedding dress of which she dreamed. For she was prepared to purchase it even over the objections of her mother. Just as she arrived, she saw the splendidly dressed woman of great beauty shopping there with a servant. Excuse me. This woman had selected many dresses for herself, and among them was the very dress the girl longed to have for her own. Trembling, the girl went up to the woman and said, "Please, madam, do not be angry with me, but I was hoping to purchase that one dress for my wedding." The girl pointed to the dress in the pile, and the woman pulled it out and put it on top. She said, "What a beautiful girl you are. I am certain that you would indeed look magnificent in the dress. Perhaps I can give it to you as a wedding present." Now the girl was quite surprised to hear this, but at the same time she saw that the woman possessed great wealth and might even regard the gift as only a small act of charity. Still, she said, "No, I would not ask for that, only that you permit me to purchase the dress myself." "No, my dear," said the woman, "I would love to make this dress a wedding present for you, and I will do so. I only ask that you come with me to my house so that I may see how fine you look in it." Uh-oh. Now the girl was overjoyed, for she longed to have that dress, and she thought to herself how happy her mother would be when she learned, sorry, y'all, that no savings had been spent for it. So she thanked the woman for her kind offer and said that she would be happy to go with her to her house. That's big red flags, y'all. After the woman completed the purchase, buying all of the dresses, including the one that the girl so wanted, then she led her to her waiting carriage, and they set out together. All this time, the girl was in a daze, and she could not wait to try on that dress. In a very short time, they arrived to a great mansion, which the girl looked more like a palace. The girl had not even dreamed that such wealth could exist in the world. She walked into the house, staring at everything and not believing her eyes. Once inside, the woman quickly took out the dress and handed it to the girl, directing her to a room where she might try it on. The girl entered the room and saw that it was filled with many mirrors in which she could see herself from every angle. She closed the door and quickly took off her old dress and put on the new one. The dress was truly magnificent, woven with gold and silver threads, with many ornaments forming a beautiful pattern. And when the girl put it on, she recognized for the first time just how beautiful she was, and at the moment she made a wish that she could always be like she was at that moment, dressed as a bride in the room of mirrors in which her image was reflected everywhere. Then the happy girl went to the door to show the woman how well the dress fit her, but the door was locked. Oh. The girl did not return home that afternoon, nor did she come back in time for dinner. After dinner, her parents went out to look for her, but they could not find her. The next day was the Sabbath, so they hurried to Rabbi Nephtali Cohen, who told them to observe the Sabbath as usual, as if she were there, and continue all the preparations for the wedding as this is what they did. That night before going to sleep, the rabbi asked a dream question in which he sought to learn why the girl had disappeared and what had happened to her. And in a dream, he learned the truth. Now, when the family of the bridegroom arrived and saw that the bride was not there, the rabbi asked the bridegroom if he were willing to risk his soul for her. And when the bridegroom said yes, the rabbi ordered his carriage to be made ready, and he and the bridegroom set out together and rode until they were out of the city. At last they arrived at a field, and the rabbi took the young man to the center of the field and told him to stay there. After the rabbi made a great circle with his staff around the bridegroom, and he said to him, there's a lot of magic in this. Know that your bride has been kidnapped by Lilith, queen of demons. She has taken her away to be a bride for her son, who is also the son of Asmodeus, king of the demons. You are your intended's only hope, for only one who would be willing to risk his soul for her could save her in this hour of danger. I need to drink some tea. Now I must leave. Soon you will see around you a great many groups of demons. All of them will curse and humiliate you and attempt to harm you. But do not be afraid of them, nor reply to them in any way. After the many carriages will arrive, which will ignore you, and you should also ignore them. Then a golden carriage will arrive, whose driver will be blind in one eye, and next to him will sit another who is the king of demons, and you must look him in the eyes and say, why did you take my bride? And you must not turn away from his gaze, no matter what. Crazy. And so it happened exactly as Rabbi Naphtali had said. Crowds of demons arrived from nowhere and stood outside the circle and taunted him in every possible way and threatened his life. But the bridegroom ignored them and said nothing. After this, many carriages arrived, and the last was a golden carriage driven by a man with one eye. And next to the driver sat a most imposing man, whom the bridegroom knew at once must be the king of demons. Trembling, the bridegroom refused to succumb to his terror, and he looked into the eyes of the king of demons and said, why have you taken my bride? And Asmodeus stared back at the bridegroom and replied, because her mother gave her as a present to me, and because she herself made a wish to remain in my palace forever. The bridegroom answered, her mother cannot do that because she was already betrothed to me. Nor do I believe that my bride truly intended to remain a prisoner in your kingdom. Just then the bridegroom heard a cry, followed by a weep and sob, and he knew that it must be his bride, held prisoner in the very place. And he longed to look at her, for he had never in his life met her. But he remembered the words of the rabbi and did not turn his gaze away from that of the king of demons. If he had, he would have seen his bride buried in the earth up to her neck, for she was almost lost to the devil. But just the knowledge that she was there gave the young man renewed strength. A great anger came over him, and he stared into the eyes of Asmodeus and said, she is mine, not yours. She will come with me. And while the two continued to stare at each other, neither turning aside, the rabbi and his people suddenly arrived, and they dug her out of, this is a wild story, earth, while the other demons looked on but did not harm them. She was still wearing the dress that Lilith had given her, but it was no longer beautiful, for it was covered with worms and maggots. They took her away and tore off the wormy shroud, replacing it with clean garment. And at the moment the demons disappeared, including Osmodeus. When the rabbi was certain that the demons were gone, he held the bridegroom out of the charmed circle. He led him out of the charmed circle to his carriage, where the bride wept great tears of relief. And as they rode back to town, the rabbi said to them, "You have done well indeed, for had you turned your eyes away from those of Osmodeus, for even an instant the girl would have been lost for good. But because you did not, she was set free." When they returned to Frankfurt, they celebrated the wedding with great joy. The girl wore the wedding dress that had belonged to her mother, and everyone said that they had never seen a more beautiful bride. And that's from Germany, 18th century. That's some wild stories. That's some wild stories. And it's like it goes into psychology, deep psychology, like mother wishing ill on the daughter because the daughter doesn't agree and wants to do things her own way, and the mother pushing her to the point of to that extreme that she is blinded to the dangers. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. It's making sense to me for sure. Now, this homunculus of Memnindes, I hope I'm saying it right, is like really wild. Really, really wild. I'm going to get some tea and then I am going to um hello John. See, there's a bunch of people that have been jumping in here into the chat that I can't see. That's really weird. Hello John, good to see you. Probably I don't know if you're still here or not. But yeah, for some reason I'm only seeing one section of the comments, which is crazy. Absolutely crazy. Let's see. How's this? Would this be better? Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm holding the thing now. All right. So the homunculus, which is interesting because I was just now learning about Epstein's science connections. It's crazy. Okay. Moses ben Maimon, Maimon, known as Maimonides, was a student of the prophet Elijah, who not only revealed to him all the mysteries of the Torah and the sciences, but also gave him two secret books, the book of creation and the book of healing. That sounds cool. With the aid of these two wondrous texts, Memnindes was able to understand the greatest secret of nature and heal all diseases. His fame spread all over Europe, and in the most distant lands, people spoke of the great wisdom of the famous Jewish doctor of Cordova. Now it happened that the only son of a rich businessman in London, whose lust for learning could not be satisfied by the teachings of his own country, secretly left his parents' home and traveled to Cordova. It would not be enough, this young man thought, to be the student of this doctor. He wanted to observe the greatly esteemed man in his own home and enter into the secrets and mysteries of the teacher reserved for himself alone. Therefore, the young man employed a cunning device to achieve his goal. He appeared before the rabbi dressed as a poor and humble manner, in a poor and humble manner, and presented himself as completely dumb. By means of where am I at? By means of pietous expressions and beseeching gestures, he made the rabbi understand that he wanted to serve him. Memenides was moved by the fate of the young man and accepted him as his servant. And by virtue of his attentiveness and punctuality, this speechless servant also so earned the favor of his master that his help was soon requested at each experiment. During this time, the student increased his theoretical knowledge as well. For in his master's absence, he studied his master's books and writings with great industry, so that after only a few years, he was almost his equal. Now it so happened that the distinguished man of the court fell ill of a strange disease. Although there was no sign of injury on any portion of his body, from time to time he would fall into a kind of frenzy and twirl about, as if driven by unseen forces, until he fell to the ground exhausted. Come on. All the Spanish doctors tested their skill in vain. The disease grew worse and worse, and the courtier's life was in great danger. As a last resort, they sent him to the Jewish doctor Memenides. He immediately recognized the problem. The sick man has a worm in his brain. Holy crap. Parasite. There is only one way to save him. Bore through the skull and remove the worm. For a long time the courtier could not persuade himself to undergo the operation. But as the disease got increasingly worse, he finally agreed. Memenides and his speechless servant came into the sick man's house with all the necessary instruments and found that a large number of doctors had assembled there to observe the procedure. With a sure and skilled hand, Memenides performed the dangerous operation. A portion of the skull was removed, and they could see the worm lying motionless on the delicate brain. Everyone everyone present was astonished at the wisdom and skill of the Jewish doctor. Now Memenides reached for some small pincers to remove the worm. Just then a strange voice from behind him cried out, "Stop, master! You'll kill the man." Startled, Memenides dropped the pincers and turned in amazement to the speaker. It was his servant. "What is this? Have you deceived me?" asked Memenides in anger. "Forgive me, master. I will explain the reason for my deception later, but now let us save a sick man. Look, the worm has been sucking powerfully on the brain, and if you pull it away with force, you will injure the organ and the man's life will be lost." "What can we do to remove the worm?" asked Memenides. "Sir," he replied, "you explained it yourself in your writings. Lay a plant on the place, and the worm will willingly leave its position to bore into it." Very wild. So Memenides sent for a plant. The courtier was cured, and Memenides became the king's official physician. After this operation, Memenides forgave his pupil for his deception and treated him as an equal. In time, the two became inseparable. Their researches were pursued largely in common, and when one of them was at a loss, the other came to his assistance. Thus, together they studied almost all branches of knowledge. One day, as they were sitting together in a study, the master said, "I see that you have almost surpassed me in learning, for you have at once absorbed what took me years to struggle to understand. And your powerful free spirit can go much further than mine, for it is more in tune with the earthly matters than my own. Let us therefore follow a path together that past generations have never pursued. We want to observe the secrets of creation and destruction in nature." and then solve the great riddle of creation. My lord and master, answered the young man, I am still young, and I am not certain how to distinguish what is true from what is false. I do not yet understand how far it is permitted for the human spirit to enter into the secrets of nature. But such daring seems to me sinful for a son of man, and can only incite the wrath of the Creator. All of this, the master replied with a sweep of his arm, belongs to the human spirit, which can observe and employ it as it wishes. The human spirit can search until it finds the truth, until it can even create a world. Sir, your words frighten me. I am, however, ready to follow you wherever this may lead. By your side, I cannot stumble. Now I recognize once more my worthy pupil, says Memonides, as he turned to the bookshelf and removed a large folio of the Book of Creation from a hidden drawer. Have you read any of this book? He asked. Often I have read with amazement, and not without terror, the wonders it contains, the pupil replied. What did you think of the secrets found here? Memonides asked. I doubt that they are true, says the pupil, but it seems that your powerful spirit wishes to be convinced. We shall make experiments, Memenides said. He opened the folio and pointed to a particular passage. Here it says, kill a healthy man, cut his body into pieces, and place the pieces in an airless glass container. What? Oh my gosh. Sprinkle upon them an essence gathered from the sap of the tree of life, huh, and the balsam of immortality. And after 9 months, the pieces of his body will be living again. It will be unharmable and immortal. What is going on? hmm Master, whom shall we get for this dangerous experiment? The young man asked. Okay, this sounds like an Osiris situation. Yep. You or me, responded Memonides, the lot shall decide. But first let us swear in the name of the Eternal One that the living one will permit the dead pieces to ripen, and will not, for whatever reason, hypocritically destroy the apparatus prematurely in order to destroy the embryo life. Okay. Both men laid their hands on the holy scroll and swore to the Almighty. The lot was cast and fell to the pupil. Memonides conjured up the angel of death, and the young man fell lifeless to the ground. Okay, the angel of death. Talking about angel trumpet. I know that all these are herb and drug references, by the way. Okay, Memonides cut the body into pieces, placed it in the glass container, sprinkled it with the wondrous essence, and left the room, which he carefully locked and did not enter for 4 months. I think we're starting to see the root of Frankenstein stories. Finally, tortured by doubt and curiosity, he looked at the mass of dead flesh, and behold, there were no longer severed pieces, but structured limbs, as if crystallized in the glass container. Happy about the restoration of his student, he left the room and waited a month. In the 5th month, the form of the body could already be recognized. In the 6th, the arteries and nerves were visible. And in the 7th, movement and life in the organs could be perceived. The researcher, however, became worried. Memonides was now convinced as a veracity of the book of creation, and he was terrified about the future. What horror threatens the human race if I let this come to fruition? If this immortal man, with all his power, wondrous among his brothers, will not people defy him and pray to him? And will not that holy revelation, the laws of Moses, be denied and finally entirely forgotten? Thus thought Maimonides as he left the room. At the end of the 8th month, uncertain and deeply troubled, he approached the growing being and was staggered as the almost completely developed face smiled at him. Unable to bear the demonic grin, he ran out of the room. "Oh Lord, what have I done? It is true that man should not investigate too deeply, but is beyond the sphere leads to hell." A few days later, Maimonides appeared before the Great Council and explained the case. After lengthy reflection, the learned rabbis agreed to protect against the horror of mankind and to preserve God's honor, that vow might be broken and such a man killed. This decision they based on the verse in Psalms: "Disregard the law, the time has come to act for God." Okay. At the beginning of the 9th month, Maimonides stepped into the room intending to destroy his creation. He brought a dog and a cat with him, and he released them and let them fly at each other. In the midst of the fighting, the glass container crashed to the floor and broke into 1,000 pieces. The dead man lay at Maimonides' feet. After he recovered himself, Maimonides buried the body and took the pernicious volume and threw it into the flames of the fireplace. But nothing was the same again. Maimonides was attacked by the learned man of the court, accused of magical practices, and escaped judgment only by a timely flight to Egypt. But even there, he was pursued and treated as an enemy both of his fellow Jews and by unbelievers. And from then on, his life was filled with sorrow. Have y'all ever heard of this guy? Have y'all ever? I need to look it up. The Homunculus of Maimonides. Mem. Memo. I'm looking at Maimonides, y'all. He's a rabbi. He did a lot of magic. Let's share this tab. Is it showing you? Okay, there you go. Here he is. He's the one that supposedly made this homunculus that we just read about. Yeah. That is where it's like house in Fez, Morocco. There he is in Cordoba. Yeah. Base relief of Maimonides in the U.S. House of. He's in the U.S. House of Representatives, y'all. Maimonides. Mishnah Torah. That's his. That is his tomb in Tiberias. The the students. He's teaching about the measure of men. Guide for the perplexed. I'm perplexed. I'm perplexed because this is supposed to be a folk tale. And this is he's on money. Shit, he's on money. Oh, they're kissing his tomb. This is a very important person. Oh, he died in the 1200s. Rambam. He's a Sephardic Jewish rabbi who is widely acknowledged as one of the most prolific and influential Torah scholars of the Middle Ages. Originally from Cordoba, where he was born on Passover Eve of 1135 or 1138, his family was exiled from Muslim ruled Spain when they refused to convert to Islam shortly after the Almohad Caliph conquered another caliph. Over the course of the next 2 decades, he resided in Fez, Acre, Jerusalem, Alexandria, and Cairo, finally settling as Fazet between 1168 and 1171. During this period, he advanced his vocation to become renowned for his achievements as an astronomer, philosopher, and physician, even being appointed to serve as personal physician to Saladin of the Ayyubidid Solonate. Sorry, I'm pretty sure I just butchered it all up. But anyway. So I wonder if there's a lot of tales of his homunculus. It's very interesting. How long have we been going? It's about an hour. It's been going an hour. I don't know if I want to continue with. There's some other stories I wanted to get into in their folklore. I wanted to get into the cellar, yeah, because that's the people under the stairs. I don't know. I like to skip around. I don't like reading, cover to cover. It's very interesting. Kiss of death. It's very interesting. Of course, summoning the patriarchs would be cool too. Any of these that we look at, I think, is going to be good. We could just go to the. We could just go straight to. Sorry. The Wizard's Apprentice, which is the next tale. This is the long intro. I didn't want to put anybody to sleep. I felt like I was already doing that. Okay. It's a rainy day. Why not spend it in some books? Okay. There once was a pious Jew and his wife who had tried for years to have a child. They had sought every known remedy, but none had succeeded in bringing them the blessing of a child. Now, one day, while the wife was shopping in the market, she overheard a conversation about a powerful wizard who was said to live in those parts. She questioned the speakers about the wizard and learned from them that his magic could accomplish virtually anything. She asked them if this included a cure for barrenness, and they told her that such a cure was indeed possible. When the woman returned home that day, she told her husband what she had heard. But even though his longing for a child was as great as hers, he did not want to ask a wizard for help. Everyone with such great power might also be dangerous. And the desperate woman was willing to take the risk, however, and nagged her husband day and night until he could no longer resist her pleas. Now the wizard lived deep in the woods. Doesn't all cool wizards live deep in the woods? Like, if you're not deep in the woods, what are you doing with your life? Hello. Hello. Yeah, we're reading from this Jewish folktale book. Mhm. All right, so now the wizard lived deep within the woods, and the man made his way there with a heavy heart, for he feared the dark arts. Yet he also put his trust in God and prayed that the Holy One, blessed be he, might protect him from any danger. It's so crazy. How is it you're still going to pray? Never mind. Never mind. When he finally arrived at the wizard's hut, the man was very surprised, for it was small, modest hut, such as might be owned by any peasant. The simple home reassured the man, for it was evident that the wizard was not seeking material gain. So the man went up to the door and knocked. When the door opened, however, he had a very great shock, for he found himself standing not to a humble shack, but in the doorway of a great palace, and before him stood the wizard, dressed in the silken robe, who invited him inside. The man could not comprehend how that palace could fit inside a simple hut, and when he entered, his amazement only deepened, for it was the most immense palace he had ever seen, even larger than that of the king. How was such a thing possible? This sounds like some Harry Potter magic, y'all. This is Harry Potter. This is, can you see the root of all these other tales? I'm seeing it. I am seeing it for sure. Okay. I have to keep my phone over here because there's some people I don't see commenting in the long form, and I apologize. I'm super sorry. Okay. Let's go. Okay, but before the man could ask, the wizard explained it is not difficult for a wizard to contain the world in a nutshell. Therefore, imagine how easy it was for me to contain a palace within a hut. Nor is it difficult for a wizard to see into the future. Therefore, I knew that you would be coming and what you would want. You want a child of your own. Neither you nor your wife will ever be happy until you have received this child. Is this not correct? The man was deeply shocked that the wizard knew everything in advance, and he stood in awe of his amazing powers. He acknowledged that everything the wizard had said was true and pleaded for help. Then the wizard's eyes turned hard, and he asked the man what it was he might offer him in return. Who the man, who was of modest means, did not know what to say, for it was obvious that he had nothing of value with which to repay the wizard. After a long silence, the wizard said, "Listen, then. If you will do as I say, I will see to it that you have a child of your own, a son. Go home, and 9 months from now your child will be born. Raise him well, and when he is 10 years old, you must bring him to me and leave him here for a year." Wow. Then you may come and take him back. On the one hand, the man was very happy to learn that his son would be born to him, a son. But on the other hand, he wondered greatly at the condition the wizard had set. Yet he also recognized that the wizard would not help him without this condition, so he agreed to do whatever was requested. The wizard nodded and then told the man before he departed, "Just remember, you must bring him to me when he is 10. If you do not, I will come and get him. Then he will not be as easy for you to take back." The man assured the wizard that he would bring the boy to him. Kind of like the Wizard of Oz, is maybe. Have y'all seen Wicked? That's a totally different story, but it's a good story. I think it's the rest of the story. But anyway, this reminds me of, Wicked Wizard. Okay. The man assured the wizard that he would bring the boy to him, and he took his leave. And all the way home, he delighted in the thoughts that he would soon be a father, and he gave little heed to the wizard's condition, for it seemed so far off. Naturally, the man's wife was filled with joy when she heard of the wizard's prophecy, and she too gave little thought to the wizard's demand. She just don't know how fast kids grow up, does she? She ain't got a clue. Groomer, yeah. Yes. Yes, Angel. Yes. I think they were, who was it? Thomas Aquinas is the give me the child until he's 7, and I'll show you the man. Yeah, this is all. Hmm. And at 7 years old, the ancient tradition says that's when you go through these initiations and you kind of remember who you were in past lives too. And a lot of it has to do with like past life recognition, from what I can tell in my studies. Okay. Just as the wizard had said, the wife gave birth to a fine and handsome son exactly 9 months after, and needless to say, his parents were delighted. They raised him in the way of a pious. The years passed swiftly, and before long, it was almost time for the boy's 10th birthday. At that time, the man recalled the conversation of the wizard and spoke of it to his wife. She was alarmed to hear of it, for long ago she had put it out of her mind, and she argued hard with her husband that they must not take the boy to the wizard, for she could not bear to be separated from him for a year. The man found himself in a dilemma and could not decide what to do. In the end, he did nothing. The birthday of the boy came, and no decision had been made, nor had the father told his son of the wizard's demands. Meanwhile, the evil wizard knew from looking at his magic mirror on the boy's birthday that the father had not set out to bring the boy to him, and his anger grew greater as the day passed. Just before sunset, when they had not arrived, the wizard pronounced a powerful spell, and far away in the home of the boy, whose birthday it was, he and his family had just sat down to dinner when a terrible thing happened, and the boy suddenly vanished, and in his place was a bird which flew around the room and then out of the window. In terror, the father and mother witnessed this, and when they had recovered from the first shock, they realized that the wizard must have cast a spell over the boy, turning him into a bird, and they grieved deeply over the loss of their son. As for the boy, he suddenly found himself as a bird, flying relentlessly into the woods, drawn there by an unseen force. Soon enough, he flew into an open window in a small hut, and the bird became a boy who found himself standing inside an immense palace. This had all happened so quickly that the boy could only believe that he had somehow fallen asleep at the table and was dreaming. And yet he had the eerie feeling that he was not dreaming at all, that in fact all these things were happening while he was awake. All at once the wizard appeared out of thin air. He called the boy by his name and told him of the bargain his parents had made so that he might be born, and that he had to spend the next year in that palace. The boy was heartbroken at the thought of being separated from his beloved parents for so long, but when the wizard told him he would be free at the end of that time, the boy overcame his fears and agreed to cooperate. For he saw at once that the wizard's power was very great and that he had no other choice. Yeah, exactly. Angel, grooming, coercive control. Naturally, the boy was very curious to know what the wizard intended to do with him. He asked about this, and the wizard told him that he was going to teach him how to be a great wizard like himself, for he wished to share the vast knowledge he had gathered over the years, and therefore he was going to make the boy his apprentice. What he didn't tell him was that he intended to make him his slave for life. Now the boy had no desire to study the black arts, for he preferred to spend his days ugh, in the study of the Torah. But he was well aware that he must not antagonize the wizard, so he agreed to become his apprentice. So it was that the wizard began to reveal little by little the mysteries at his command. And because the boy paid close attention, he was able to master the black arts much sooner than even the wizard had expected. And in the span of that year, he came to know almost as much as his master. Hmm. Now, that year passed ever so slowly for the boy's poor parents, but at last the time came when it was once again the boy's birthday. Then the father returned to the forest and went to the hut of the wizard. The wizard opened the door, and when he saw who it was, he looked at him with disdain and said, "I see you have arrived here on time, but that was not the case a year ago, and therefore it is far from certain that you may take your son back with you." All at once he pronounced a spell, and the boy, who was in the other room, was suddenly transformed into a bird again. One with black feathers and a white crown. But at the same time, two frogs that lived in the pond behind the house were also transformed into birds, which flew into the open window. And so it was that there were three birds flying around inside the palace. Then the wizard laughed and said to the man, "One of these three birds is your son. Tell me which one, and I'll reverse the spell. And if you choose correctly, you will know it soon enough. And if not, you will find yourself in possession of a frog, and your son will be compelled to remain with me for the rest of his life." Wow. The poor father was terrified at those words, for the fate of his son was in his hands. Yet he had no way of knowing which of these three birds to select. Now the boy, who had become a bird, had overheard the wizard's demand and realized that his fate hung in the balance, for he had long suspected that the wizard had no intention of letting him return home. At first, the boy turned bird tried to pronounce the spell to change himself back into a boy, but he found that he could not. The wizard was somehow preventing him from doing this. Yet his poor father was going to have to make a decision at any moment, and the boy was desperate to give him a sign. So the boy turned bird pronounced a spell, and all at once the colors of his feathers changed so that they were no longer black, but black and white like the stripes of a talus. Further, the crown of his head became all black so that it resembled a yarmulke. And when the father took one last look at the birds and recognized the resemblance to the talus and the yarmulke, he realized that that his son was trying to assist him, and he selected that bird. Then the face of the wizard grew very red, and he was angrily pronounced the spell that changed the bird back into the boy. He could not understand how the man had made the right choice, for he had not noticed the changes in the bird's appearance, nor would he have known what they represented. So he thought the father had made a lucky guess. Then he spoke bitterly, saying, "You guessed correctly, so the boy is free to go with you. But heed my warning, because he is not remaining here. He is not to make use of the magic skills I have taught him. If he does, you can be sure I will make him my apprentice once again, and the next time there will be no way for you to get him back." Wow. Oh, love you too, Lee. Thank you for the love. Thank you very much. Very appreciated. It's time for tea break, too. When the father and son had departed, let's see, from the den of the wizard, they embraced and shared tears of joy. The father could not believe the evil wizard had let the boy go, but the boy explained that all conditions of a spell must be fulfilled. The wizard would not go back on his word once the right bird had been identified. And they both gave thanks to the Holy One. Blessed be he for having set the boy free from the wizard who had been so reluctant to let him go. Yes, apprentice. Right? Let's see. Good, 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 mugly. Yeah. Now, and how about that? Like, because you're not staying with me, you can't use any magic. And if you use magic, I'm going to come get you. It's so weird. Just like, devil's playthings, right? Okay. After this one, I'm going to have to go stir my beans. Got beans in the crock pot. I can smell them, smell them. Okay. Now there was a grand celebration when the boy arrived home with his father, and before long they were back to their lives of old, in which the boy and his father studied the Torah together every day. And the boy was careful not to use any of the magic skills he had learned during his year in the wizard's palace, for he had not forgotten the wizard's warning. So it was that things went well for several months, but the time came when the fortunes of the father began to wane, and he soon found himself penniless. Things reached the point that the family was about to lose its home, when the son went to his father and said, "So far I have not used the magic I learned in that long year, Father, but perhaps the time has come. Let me pronounce a spell that will turn me into a horse of great value, and you can take me to the fair and sell me there." How sad is that? Just turn me into a horse and sell me. What? This is the stories that have been taught to kids. Yeah, this makes. Mm. And when you sell me, you should remove my reins so that I will be able to turn back into a boy within a few hours and return home. But do not forget to remove the reins, or I will be compelled to remain a horse for the rest of my life. Now, at first, the father rejected this plan, for it defied the wizard's warning. But when became clear that there was nothing else they could do to save their home, he reluctantly agreed. After the boy promised to pay back his victim as soon as he could, then he and his father prayed to God to forgive them for acting thus in their great need, and soon afterward the boy pronounced a spell and was instantly transformed back into a black horse of immense value. The father then put reins on the horse and led it to the fair, where he received a price of 100 rubles for the horse from a wealthy nobleman. Then the father took off the reins, explaining that they were not included in the sale, and the nobleman led it away. That night the nobleman locked the horse in his stable, but when he went to admire it the next morning, it was gone. He searched for it everywhere, but there was not a single sign to be found. He did not know that the horse had turned into a boy, and that the boy had climbed out of the stable window and had run back home. Thus the family saved their house and brought themselves a period of peace, and when the wizard did not appear, they thought he did not know the boy had used magic. But in truth, the evil wizard was well aware of what had happened. He was simply waiting to strike when he was ready. As time passed, however, they became even poorer until things grew desperate enough that the boy again proposed to his father that he transform himself into a horse. As before, his father was very reluctant, but he recognized their desperate plight, and at last he agreed that they would do as before. Once again, the son reminded his father to take off the reins before handing him over to whomever purchased him. For if he forgot to do this, the boy would never be free to come home again. This time the boy changed himself into a magnificent white horse, worth at least 200 rubles. And no sooner had they reached the fair with the old with an old nobleman walking toward them, and immediately agreed to pay this price. But the old man talked so much that he confused the father, and the nobleman ended up taking the horse and the reins as well. Then, before the father could stop, he mounted the horse and in a flash had ridden off into the woods. The father ran after them, but they were nowhere to be seen, and he turned home filled with grief at this terror. Meanwhile, the nobleman dismounted the horse in the woods and tied it to a tree. Then he revealed himself to the boy turned horse, saying in a cruel voice, "Did you forget my warning not to use the magic you learned? Now your punishment is to begin." And the evil wizard took a whip and began hitting the horse. Oh, he hit him so hard and so long that eventually the reins fell off, and as soon as the reins were gone, the boy changed himself into a wolf and ran off as fast as he could. When the wizard saw this, he quickly pronounced a spell so that he too became a wolf and chased after the other. With the second wolf howling behind him, the boy turned wolf ran as fast as he could until he reached the river. By then, the howling second wolf had brought together a pack of wolves, all of which chased after him. Therefore, the boy changed himself into a fish as soon as he reached the water. It sounds like some Greek mythology, too, right? The changing. Hang on a minute. What was you saying? Hold on, Angel. Pistachio is a six. Yes. Yes. It's all connected. I fully believe they told these stories to keep perpetuating things. Okay. And just as he reached it, he saw that a with princess, with her royal servants was bathing there. Hmm. At that instant, the boy changed himself into a gold ring, which the princess found in the water at her feet. She was astonished at the ring's beauty and put it on her finger and showed it to all her servants, who gasped in awe. And the wizard, in the form of a fish, saw all that had happened and realized that the boy had escaped him for then. But he was determined that he would still capture him and punish him in a terrible way. So the wizard changed himself back into a man and went to the king and told him that he had lost a ring at the edge of the river that day, which he believed the princess might have found. The king told him that if this was the case, the ring would be returned, and he called the princess into his presence. When she arrived, the king asked her about the ring, and she acknowledged that she had found a ring exactly as the wizard had described. The king then asked her to give it to him, and just as the princess went to take it off, the ring fell off her finger. As it struck the floor, it turned into a huge serpent, which lunged at the wizard and bit him, causing him to die on the spot. And an instant later, the serpent changed back into the boy, who told the astonishing court the whole story. Now, when the king heard this remarkable tale, he was filled with sympathy as well as awe, for the boy had truly learned all that the wizard had to teach him. And when the princess saw what a handsome and clever lad he was, she lost her heart to him. So it came to pass that the boy and the princess were wed. How old was the princess? Because the boy's only like 11 at this time. But it come to pass, right? So, okay. He came to inherit half of the kingdom and repaid the noble whose horse had vanished. Then he invited his mother and father to stay in the palace, and they all lived happily ever after. And that is an Eastern Europe oral tradition. Doesn't that sound like Zeus? That just sounds like Zeus to me a little bit. Okay. How are you all doing? Are you still with me? Are you watching? How's it going? Are you in there? Do we want to do some more? Hmm. What is the Helen of Troy's the next one. I thought about doing that one. That one sounds really good too. I think I went like an hour and a half yesterday. Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to get through this because like I said, it was I don't know if you all remember like in the 80s Oprah did these interviews with these people who were in satanic cults or survivors of satanic cults. And this one book is a book that this girl, this survivor did recommend. Jewish girl. She said you need to read it. There's truth in these books. And it's far more mild than Savali. And Savali speaks. If y'all know who Savali is, that's crazy. It's more of a Catholic side of things because it's in every aspect of situations. They're wanting you to believe that it's the pagans. They want you to believe that it's those that claim to be Satanists when in actuality it's the elites and the upper echelon bureaucracy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, do you all want to hear the Helen of Troy? I'll let y'all think about it. I'm gonna go stir my beans. I'll, I'll be right back. Okay. You're playing in traffic on your bike. Are you listening to me while you're playing in traffic? Woo, girl. Okay. All right. I'm drinking licorice, little licorice root, mm, white willow bark. Hello, Nastya. How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. So, this Helen of Troy is supposed to be. I don't know if y'all remember what I was saying yesterday. The introduction of the Helen of Troy is not actually about. I don't think it's related. No, it's not. It's not at all related to the Greek myths. The Helen of Troy. It's just not. Okay. One day in a small town in the south of France, a disheveled man arrived and purchased an old house. This man's body was hunched over as if with defeat, his eyes focused on the ground. But when he lifted his head, it was seen that his eyes had a ferocious look, like that of one obsessed. This man's name was Joseph della Rena, but that is all he revealed about himself. He refused to say where he had come from or in what kind of work he had been engaged. Rarely was he seen to depart from the house, not even to go to the market. His absence made him the subject of rumors among people of that town. Some said that he was a sorcerer, others that he was the devil himself. He had sometimes been heard speaking to someone in his house although he lived alone and no one was ever seen entering or leaving there. His presence in that town was unsettling. Okay. Now, if the truth be known, this old man was indeed a wizard. Once long ago he had been a sage and had even been regarded as a holy man. But fate had dragged him to the other side, and now he was wedded to Lilith, queen of demons. Hold on. I can't do this without my. Okay. He's married to Lilith, queen of demons. Gotta add some sound effect in there. That one right there. Okay. For it was none other than Lilith herself to whom he spoke, for she instructed him in the ways of black magic. It was through the use of this magic that he sustained himself by transporting exotic fruits from around the world, carobs from the Holy Land, olives from Greece, mountain apples from the lands of the south. In his youth, he had spent many a day fasting for some holy purpose. Now he loved to savor succulent fruits and partake of delicious dishes. When, with the help of Lilith, he was able to indulge himself as much as he wished. But he was driven by other desires besides that of food. Most of all, he wished to possess the most desirable woman in the world. Nor was Lilith jealous of this. On the contrary, she encouraged him to fulfill his every lust. Now, in all of Europe, it was known that Queen Dolphina of France was the most beautiful woman alive, and Joseph Dellarina was determined that she was to be his, and on his own terms in his own house. And with the help of Lilith, he was able to snatch her for himself. Is this another Ghislaine Maxwell situation? I'm just wondering. First, using the spells that he had learned, many of them involving holy names that he had once used for holy purpose. Joseph Dallarina created the illusion that the modest house in which he lived was a palace. From the outside, it seemed exactly as it had been, old and dilapidated, but on the inside, it appeared vast and without end. It sounds like that's that wizard we just read about. Where was I? Sorry. For with the help of Lilith, he had cast a spell that had transported the palace of Osmodeus, king of the demons. There we go. There we go. It's all king of the demons inside his very house. And because that palace was itself an illusion, it was no problem to make it fit in such a small place. In fact, it was a much larger home than was usual for a palace, which normally was hidden in a secret cavern of a remote cave in the mountains of darkness. Once he had created the impression of vast wealth, Joseph de la Rena pronounced the names of the enabled him to snatch Queen Dolphina, which as she fell asleep. Hold on, just as she fell asleep. So they caught her. Pronounce the names. He pronounced the names that enabled him to snatch her, the Queen Delphina, just as she fell asleep, so that her body vanished from the royal bed and suddenly appeared in the elaborate bed of Joseph Dellarina. Okay, so when it says like pronounce the names, these are herbs, y'all. You don't just conjure demons. You've got to illicit substances. The queen was awakened from her sleep by the touch of hands undressing her, and when she opened her eyes and saw a terrifying visage of Joseph Dellarina hovering above her, she almost fainted. To comfort herself, she slept. She kept repeating that it must be a dream, but it was not. Oh my gosh, do you all know who else sees people in dreams? Hey, Belle, good to see you. How you doing? Hope you're doing good. Good to see you. I've been missing everybody. And this is a fascinating book of Jewish folklore, so hope y'all don't mind. Okay, so we have abduction and graping here in child folklore. Yep. In fact, the horror was only the beginning, for the look in Joseph Delaran's eyes was so terrible that the queen shortly feared for her life. Thus she did not resist when he plucked the flower of her beauty, for she saw that it would be futile. Right there. Y'all see that? Yep. She did not resist when he plucked the flower of her beauty, for she saw that it would be futile. We know what this is. Afterwards, Joseph de la Reina spoke for the first time. You are wise, your majesty, not to try to withhold your favors from me, for know that you are fully within my power, and your very life rests in my hands. Know, too, that you will return to the palace of the king in the morning, but that you must remain here with me all night. Indeed, the night belongs to us, and we will meet on many occasions, as you will see. As the queen trembled when she heard these words, knowing that she had fallen into the hands of a mad wizard, she took around she looked around the room and saw that it was decorated with more precious objects than was her own palace, and she knew that such wealth combined with the power that had transported her there was a formidable menace indeed. To think about that. And this was written, these are old tales. These are old tales, guys. This one particular book was published in the early 1900s, translated. Okay. The thought that she must remain all night with the madman terrified the queen, and in desperation she sought to establish a conversation with him that she might be spared his renewed lust. She said, I did not know that such a master made his home in our kingdom. If you had come to the palace and revealed your great power, surely you would have been made my husband's viceroy. So see, he took another man's wife. Even now it is not too late. Return me to my chamber, and I shall put all that has happened out of my mind and see to it that you receive an audience with my husband the king. See, you see what she's like, just let me go. You had your way with me once, just let me go. Give me back to my husband because you're powerful. So Joseph, I'm not reading his whole name, laughed hideously when he had heard this. Why should I serve the king who is but a king among men? My king rules all the forces of the other side, all of the legions of demons, all of the gates of hell. And poor Queen Delphina realized that she was the victim of one who had made himself a slave to the powers of evil, and she could barely conceive that such a thing could be happening to her. Still, she tried to conceive that such a thing could be happening to her. Still, she tried to remain calm. "Who then are you?" she asked, "and how did you come to be here?" Now, when Queen asked the question to Joseph, a terrible pang of remorse passed through him, and for a moment he recalled the promise that he had thrown away when redemption had been almost at hand. Since that day, so many years ago, he had not spoken to another human being. His only companion had been Lilith, who had infected him with her evil ways, so that not a spark of holiness remained within him. No man alive knew what had happened to him, for those disciples that had embarked on his folly with him had all lost their lives at the same disastrous moment, and a great longing to reveal his history came over him, and, as if in a trance, Joseph began to speak. "My name is Joseph de la Rena. I dare to disclose my name because there is no mortal power greater than my own. When you return, try, if you wish, to seek me out. Send the palace guard, send an entire legion of your army. It will do you no good. No one can find me. So safe I am from the revenge on the part of your paramour that I will reveal to you all that you have asked. Even more, I will tell you my history, as terrible as it is, and you will know to whom you have given yourself. Know that in the she didn't give herself to him. He took it. Know that in the world there are only a handful of sages to whom the prophet Elijah comes to reveal the hidden truths of the Torah, and long ago I was one of these. Elijah was my constant companion. From his lips I drew down the fire of Sinai as if for the first time. Excuse me. From him I heard the very same truths that were revealed to Moses on high, and whose echo has been lost in this world from that time. And from all the secrets and mysteries that became transparent to me, I came to realize that my greatest desire was not an impossible wish, but one that could be accomplished. What was this, you wonder? I longed more than anything else to bring to this world the age of redemption. I longed to hasten the coming of the only one who can bring the end of days any closer. I sought to beckon the Messiah. He turned evil. Is that correct? Is that right? I went backwards, y'all. Himself from the palace, known as the bird's nest, where he makes his home on high. These thoughts haunted me for many days until I could not restrain myself any longer. And one day I begged Elijah to reveal to me the secret behind this mystery. At that, Elijah grew silent and departed, nor did he return. When I realized that he had abandoned me, I fell into a great sorrow. I recalled how Adam had stood in the river going after his sin until his skin began to sag, and I too stood in the river and wept and prayed and fasted for many days. And at last Elijah sought me out and asked me why I had prayed so insistently for his return. I told him that my only desire was to restore the Shekinah, the bride of God, to her rightful abode and to bring her exile to an end. Elijah told me that what I sought to do was very dangerous. Yeah, an equilibrium balance of sorts, and that the likelihood of success was very small, and that he asked me to abandon the quest. But when he saw that I would not, and that I was willing to give up my life to accomplish this deed, he imparted many secrets and revealed many mysteries. And I listened to those words so intently that as soon as each one was spoken, it was engraved in my memory for all time. And Elijah told me all that I had to do in order to bring the end of the reign of evil. and this was to capture none other than the rulers of the Dark Kingdom, Osmodeus the king and Lilith the queen, the same Lilith who now is my wife. The searing memory of his great fall suddenly struck Joseph anew, and for a long time he was silent. And the queen Delphia began to recognize for the first time a kernel of humanity in him that was still capable of regret. Now Joseph Delarena's silence lasted for a very long time, and finally the sky began to grow light. When he realized that dawn was imminent, he jumped up and turned his back on the queen and whispered in reverse the holy names that had made it possible for him to snatch her in the first place. In an instant, where was I? An instant later, the queen found herself back in her own royal chamber, next to her husband, the king, who was sound asleep. The queen was greatly relieved when she realized that she had escaped from the clutches of a madman, but she was still haunted by the horror of that night. Worst of all was the memory of his promise to snatch her away again. Did he mean the very next night? She could not even bear to consider the thought, and even though she remembered well his warning that they could not find him, she did not intend to be his victim without a struggle. And without any further hesitation, she woke the king and told him her terrible tale. Now, as might be expected, the king had a hard time believing the story of the queen. After all, guards had been posted at the door all night, the windows had been locked, and he himself had been sleeping aside beside her. He thought that it must have been a terrible and very vivid dream that had afflicted her. Still, even such a dream would be a bad sign, and that day he called upon his soothsayers to reveal its meaning. But when the soothsayers, who were far more familiar with the ways of black magic, heard all that the queen had to say, they quickly confirmed her account to the king, who finally came to accept it as true. And then a great fury possessed him, a veritable darkness and lust for revenge, for his wife had been ravished and his honor had been sold in the most terrible way. Nor had the danger passed, for the queen remained in a very grave jeopardy indeed. That evening, the king saw to it that the guards were posted not only outside the chamber, but also within. He himself remained awake, for he intended to see with his own eyes if the queen did, in fact, disappear. For he still hoped against hope that it was only a dream. The soothsayers had warned them that the most dangerous time was at midnight, and as it approached, the king became even more vigilant, holding his wife tightly in his arms. Then, just as the stroke of 12, the queen suddenly vanished. No one had entered, but she was snatched from his arms before their eyes. And when the king saw this, his terror was so great that he fainted. Far away in the south, the queen suddenly found herself once more in the palace of illusion of Joseph. As before, his intention was to possess her at once, and she felt even more helpless than before, for all the efforts of the king to save her had failed. Afterward, without being asked, Joseph continued his story, and that is when the queen realized how eager he was to tell it. He said, from the prophet Elijah, he had learned that the secret of how to capture Osmodeus and Lilith, the very rulers of the forces of darkness, could be imparted only by Metatron, prince of the angels. And in order to invoke Metatron and call down his fiery chariot, it was required that my disciples and I subsist on a little as subsist, sorry, on as little as possible for 21 days until our bodies were purified. Furthermore, We were to immerse ourselves 21 times every day. We were to strengthen ourselves as necessary only by smelling spices. What? Especially pure frankincense. And after the 21 days, we were to fast 3 days and nights. And on the third day, at the time of the afternoon prayers, we were to put on our tefillin and cover our faces with our prayer shawls. And then, and only then, we were to pronounce a series of holy names that Elijah revealed. We did exactly as Elijah had directed until by the end of the third day of complete fasting. It felt as if our souls were about to take flight. We each put on our stylus and tefillin, and at last I spoke the holy names that Elijah had revealed. Thunder and lightning roared over us, and the sky split open, and we fell on our faces in terror. The holy earth shook as if it were about to split asunder. A great whirlwind swirled around us, and out of the whirlwind spoke a terrible, terrible voice. Speak, you who are flesh and blood, dust and worms. Why have you called me here? Is this how you honor your Maker? I replied, I am like a lifeless stone in your presence. Without your help, I have not even the strength to speak. Then the angel Metatron, for that is who it was, touched me, and a shock passed through my body as if I had been struck with lightning. I found that my strength had not only been restored, but it was much increased. I revealed my intention to the prince of the angels, and when he saw that I sought to restore the world to its prelapsarian state, at last he revealed the great mystery that I so longed to learn, how to capture how the capture of the evil rulers might be accomplished. And Metatron warned us to be very careful not to forget any detail of what he had told us. Then the angel departed in his fiery chariot, leaving us in a state of shock and awe, for all that we had sought, was now within our grasp. Here again, as Joseph recalled how close he had come to completing his quest, he fell into a morose silence while Queen Delphina continued to pray for the night to end. And yet, if the truth be known, she also found herself curious to know how this madman had sought to capture the rulers of darkness and how he had failed. And she wondered if this tale might contain a hint of how she might be set free from his grasp. At the first light of dawn, Joseph arose as before, spoke the spell with his back turned, and an instant later the queen found herself back in her bedroom, where the king and his guards had spent a miserable night. The king was so happy to see his wife that he shed tears and embraced her, and he vowed that he would find a way to save her from the monster who had snatched her from his arms. That day the king called in all his soothsayers and told them that their lives would be in danger if they did not protect the queen from this terrible magic. The soothsayers tried to explain that the level of sorcery was far greater than they had ever encountered, but the king refused to listen. At last, one of the soothsayers came forward and said, I have read, Your Majesty, that only way to gain power over such a sorcerer is to obtain an object that belongs to him. It must not seem likely that we can prevent him from taking her again, if that is indeed his wish, but perhaps the queen can find a way to bring back one of his possessions. Then we can make use of our own magic. And when the queen was informed of this, she promised to bring back something, whatever was possible, for she, more than anyone else, wanted that nightmare to end. She was being pimped out nightly. That sounds like some modern day craziness. Yeah. That night at midnight, it happened again, but the queen vanished in sight of all of those attempting to guard her. Again, she found herself in the arms of a madman who ravished her without hesitation. As he did, the queen tried to turn her thoughts away from him and concentrating on finding something that she might take back with her that night, something that might serve to reveal to the wizards the precise location of that palace. It was then that her eyes lit upon a golden wine goblet next to the bed. She reached for it unseen by Joseph and slipped it in beneath the pillow. And this single act helped her to endure the long hours that remained before dawn. As before, Joseph had barely. There we go. Can you all hear me okay? I hope so. Okay. As before, Joseph had barely satisfied his lust when he began to speak, continuing to tell the tale as if in a trance. No sooner had Metatron departed in the fiery chariot than we set out to complete the quest. As he had directed us, we traveled to Mount Seir and ascended it, and there we performed many matters of holiness, and we ate little and immersed ourselves in the prayers of unification. The angel had assured us that everything we did below would also be performed on high, and thus the sacred power would be able to surround that evil, making possible its capture and defeat. After that, we began to search everywhere on the mountain, for the angel had made it known that in a certain ruin, the wrecked Osmodeus and his wife Lilith would be found in the form of two black dogs, one male, one female. Before long, we did indeed recover that ruin, and by peering through the holes in the wall, we saw two terrible dogs, just as the angel had described them. So too did the dogs see us, and they began to growl, low at first, and then louder and louder until they were howling. That terrible noise raised the hair on the back of my neck and caused me great pain. But we did not turn back. No, we entered the ruin, in our hands two chains, the links of which we engraved with God's name. We held these chains out before us, and we went forward toward the dogs, who did not attempt to flee, but seemed frozen in place. At last we threw the chains over their necks, and all at once the dogs vanished, and in their place stood two demons on whose faces were inscribed the agony of defeat. Then a great thrill passed through all of us, and we held accomplished what none other had even dared to attempt. And the rulers of evil were our own prisoners to do with as we wished. Now the angel had warned us to take care not to give them any kind of substance. And soon enough, the two of them began to beg to eat and drink, but we gave them nothing at all. Instead, we led them down the mountain, for that is what the angel had directed us to do. All along the way, the two pleaded with us at once, at least a drop of water, for they claimed that their throats were parched. These requests moved me, but I still managed to deny them, for I remembered myself of the angel's warning. Just as we were about to reach the base of the mountain, that mountain on which the power of the demons was most abundant, Lilith and Osmodeus made the most heart-rending pleas, claiming that they could not go on, for they were without strength. They begged that at least they should be permitted to sniff some incense to gain enough strength to complete the descent. And here I found it hard to refuse, for I could not imagine that such a minor gesture could be dangerous. Therefore, I did permit them One such sniff of our incense, and that is all it took for both of them to cast off their chains. A moment later, I saw Asmodeus grab the first of my disciples and cast such a great distance that he soon vanished from our sight. One after another, each of my disciples was cast from the mountain in that way, and all of them, I am certain, met their death. In less than a minute, I was the only one left alive. Osmodeus looked at me fiercely, and my heart almost stopped beating. Then one picked me up and cast me as he had the others, so that I found myself flying through the air as if I had wings. That flight seemed to last so long that I felt that I must have passed over half the earth. Suddenly, I found myself crashing downward into a green area, and then all at once I found myself landing in arms that broke my fall and embraced me. And when I realized that I was not dead because those arms had blunted my fall, I looked up and saw that it was none other than Lilith herself who had caught me. Of course, I was much amazed, and when she saw this, she said, "You may wonder why I have saved your life when it was your intention to destroy me. The answer is that I have recognized in you an ember of evil, and now that you are mine, I shall fan that ember until it burst into flame." Mm. Mm-mm-mm. With these words, Joseph stopped speaking and glared at Queen Delphina. The look in his eyes was so terrifying that she was afraid that he might kill her then and there. But that moment of hatred passed, followed by one of great grief, and as before, he fell into a morose state and was silent. Queen Delphina remained completely still, barely breathing, for she was so afraid of what he might do next. But at the same time, she marveled at the tale he had told her, and she understood at last how he had become so evil. For she knew that he was completely in the power of the demoness Lilith, who had enabled him to transport her, the queen, to his chamber to do with as he wished. This is so crazy, y'all. It seemed years before dawn at last arrived. And as it did, Joseph pulled himself up and mumbled the words that released the queen from his spell. But just as he turned his back, she reached under the pillow and clutched the golden goblet. And when an instant later she found herself back in the royal chamber, the goblet was still in her hand. The king was the first to see it. He grabbed it and gave it to the soothsayers and the men that they discovered from whence it came. Then the soothsayers hurried off to do their magic, hoping that the secret might be revealed. And lo and behold, before even an hour had passed, they returned smiling, for their spells had worked, and now they knew the very town in which the evil sorcerer resided. Even more, they knew the very house in which he could be found. Upon learning this, the king did not hesitate, but ordered that all of his palace guards set out at once in order to reach that town before midnight. And within minutes, the guards were urging their stallions to gallop in that direction. Now, it was normally a 2-day journey to that town from the capital, but this time the soldiers did not stop to eat or drink or rest. Even for a moment, they pushed themselves and their horses relentlessly so that they might arrive before midnight and thus spare the queen another night of torture. And at the very stroke of 12, they arrived at the door of the house where they knew the sorcerer was to be found. True, it did not resemble the palace the queen had described, but the soothsayers had warned them that that might be the case, and without a moment's hesitation, they broke down the door just as Joseph was about to pronounce the spell to transport the queen to his bed. He could not believe he had been found. For a terrible moment, they stared at one another. Then he pronounced the spell. Not the spell to snatch the queen, but one to make himself invisible, and suddenly he vanished before their eyes. The soldiers could not believe that they had lost him suddenly, and they searched the palace from top to bottom, but no sign of the sorcerer was to be found. for he had walked among them invisible and slipped out the door. Now the spell of invisibility lasted for only a few hours, and then it could not be renewed until a full day had passed. Joseph knew that he had to find a safe place to hide by the time the spell wore off, for the soldiers had seen him, and now there would be guards searching everywhere. Joseph remembered that there was a cave near the sea on the side of a cliff. Lilith had first taken him there when he had been cast from the Holy Land to France by Osmodeus. And beneath the light of the full moon, he set out for the sea. He reached it shortly before the spell wore off and quickly hid himself inside a dark cave where he could not be seen even when he was visible. And only when he was finally safe did he realize how frightened he had been. How had they found him in the first place? How could he not? He could not imagine unless the queen had taken some object of his back to her palace. Now he would have to give the queen up. He could not dare risk trying to capture her again. For the first few days after this near catastrophe, Joseph slept in the dark of the cave. Each time that he woke and recalled his humiliation, he forced himself back to sleep again. At last, his hunger kept him awake, and he knew that he would have to sustain himself. Once again, he invoked the spells of Lilith had taught him. Excuse me. Transporting the palace of Osmodeus with all of its furnishings into the very cave. So, too, did he make use of spells that provided him with whatever he wanted to eat. And in that place, he slowly recovered from his shock. For it was not the first great shock of his life, yet somehow it was almost as hard for him to bear. To have failed as a holy man was one thing, but to have failed as a wizard was another. Thoughts of revenge often obsessed him, but he realized that the king had his own sorcerers waiting to combat his magic and that it was too dangerous a challenge. Challenge them again. At last, Joseph's lust was restored to him, and one day a thought occurred to him that gave him something for which to live. Perhaps it was true that Queen Delphina was the most beautiful woman in the world, but that was true only of the time. In the past, there had been many others far more beautiful, and above them all was one whose beauty had provoked the Trojan War, Helen of Troy. The thought of possessing such a legendary beauty for himself slowly took possession of Joseph, blotting out the memory of the queen and the humiliation he had known at her hand. And before long, he became consumed with the thought that he must make Helen of Troy his own. Now, between the secrets that the angels had revealed to Joseph Delarina and those of Lilith had supplied, his powers were very great. And at last he found a way not only to transport a human being across great space, but across the centuries as well. The first time he cast a spell, he shivered in anticipation. For a moment of the illusory palace in which he lived seemed to flicker, as if the illusion were about to end. And then all at once the cries of an infant shocked Joseph. He found, to his amusement, an infant loudly cried in his bed. The shock soon passed, though, when he realized that he had succeeded in his basic attempt, but that he had called Helen from out of the past, too young for his purpose. Too young for his purpose. Quickly, impatiently, Joseph pronounced the spell that sent the infant back, and then he spoke again to summon an older Helen. His lust for her was so great that it was palpable, and he was certain that it was about to be satiated. Again, the palace flickered, this time more than before. Then a figure suddenly appeared on the bed, that of Helena Troy. But it was not Helen as Joseph had expected to find her. No, it was Helen. This Helen wore eaten a worm-eaten shroud and consisted solely of bones. But what was far more horrible was that the skeleton was alive. In invoking it from the past, Joseph had brought it back to life. And as he watched in horror, the arms of the skeleton opened and reached out to embrace him. A wave of pure horror washed over Joseph, and he dashed from the room. But there too the bone but there too the bones of the once lovely Helena awaited him, seeking an embrace, and the terrified sorcerer ran from the house. In his terror he forgot that the palace was but an illusion, and that his true home was in a cave on the side of a cliff overlooking the sea. No sooner did he step out of the door than he found himself falling, and a second before his body shattered on the rocks below, he saw the bones of Helena waiting for him, arms open. Oh my gosh. Guys, these are ancient Jewish tales, folklore tales. It's crazy. It's from the 16th century. It's the 1500s, y'all. What do you think about that? I think it's crazy. I think it's insane. Let me pull it back up. Hold on. Hold on. Let me get it back. There we go. There's your book. You can find it on archive.org. I call it The Power of the Schwartz. Yep. Selected and retold by Howard Schwartz. The Power of the Schwartz. Yeah. So, what do y'all think about that? What do y'all think about that? I think it's a hearken to a lot of different things, actually. Yeah, yeah. So just follow the trails, listening to the name drops of an interview of I say lady that was on Oprah in the late 80s, early 90s. Mentioned this book. Yeah, it's very interesting. And the more we find out too, the more coming out with like the Epstein stuff and everything. Yeah. Savali Speaks, that's another one to look at if you're wanting to know kind of the stories of it. And Melanie Breris told me, she said, we have to dress it up. They dress it up. They give it a Disney spin. This is a Disney spin, y'all. Because they have to tell us without telling us. Disney spins. All right. That's all we're going to be reading today. I'm read out. 2 hours and almost 15 minutes. Yeah. I'm read out. That's why I keep yawning. Anyway, I hope you all like it. I like it. I liked reading it because I'm also digging into some ancient Northern European Aryan traditions too. Our true history is hidden. We got to piece it together. I got cats growling at me now because I'm like, you're not sitting right here right now. Listen, you gonna move? Gonna move? Come on. Do you hear that? Yeah, she's vicious. Her name should have been Lilith. Yeah. All right. So these tales, I believe, is just a continuation of keeping women disempowered, decentered, and damned. Yeah, keeping us damned. Yeah, and I haven't really figured out this deep midwife connection that seems to be tied to the Lilith and the Nana and the mysteries and the dark occult and the occult period, and it's the midwives, it's shamanic. It's all tied in together. So, anyway, thank you all for hanging out. Angel, if you're still there, thank you so much. Bella, everybody in the site, if you're still there, thank you for hanging out. Thank you for hanging with me. I might be doing more tomorrow. I've got a few calls I got to make. We're still looking for a place. Send us good juju. We could use it. Send us good juju. Okay. You all have a wonderful Sunday. Bye bye.